Good afternoon, everybody. The post-lunch session is often the toughest one, but I still see quite a few people have turned up. So thank you all. Thank you all for coming in for this session. Um, I'll start off by saying that we live in a very dynamic world. Higher oil prices, higher gas prices, rapid investments in renewable, we've seen it all. There's so much changing around us, but in middle of it, there are, I think, a couple of truths or truisms, I would say. First, I would say the ever increasing and visible impact of climate change. We can ignore it, but it's all for us to see what's happening around us, extreme summers, extreme winters, extreme rain. Whether 1.5 degrees breached or not, we don't know. We can debate about it, but we can see and feel it around us. So there is a huge challenge in front of us. But I firmly believe in the second point, which is human ingenuity often rises up to challenge, and it is technology which powers the future. In today's panel discussion, we would focus on what's happening on the technology front. I would not take you through the tongue twister title, which I'm sure some consultant would have written, but we'll just talk about what's happening on technology front around energy. Just as an introduction on the panel, my name is Vikas Kaushal. I'm partner with Kearney, consultant focused on. I've been focused on the energy domain for last 3 decades. On my left is Dr. Rajesh Gattupalli. He's president of Honeywell UOP. His company is leading suppliers of licensors of process technology to energy sector, both the traditional and now the new energy sector, increasingly focused on these topics. Next is Vikram Kapur. He's president of Renew, looking at deploying millions and billions of dollars of capital into decarbonization domain. He's been a consultant like me before, but now an active participant on the other side of the table. Next is Robert Linck, Chief Investment Officer and co-founder of Shell Ventures, investing into ventures which are accelerating energy and mobility transition, and he also oversees Shell Ventures investments in India. And last on the panel is Clare Harris, EVP New and Nordics of Power2X. This was her title for last week. It's a new title now, but we'll hold it for the moment. Power2X, for those who don't know, is an accelerator of energy transition with focus on clean and green molecules. We have a very good panel representing investors in the technology domain, and we also have people who are actually using those investments and using those technology innovations and putting dollars behind it. To make it interesting and keeping us awake, I'm going to run it into 3 rounds, time permitting. I will request the panelists to keep their answers to roughly about 2 to 2.5 minutes on each of these rounds. And then in the end, if there is time, we could have cross questions to each others. Let me start with Rajesh, since you're sitting on my left, the first one. You represent a company which has a long-term been a technology leader in the energy domain. For decades, you've been supplying technologies to traditional energies and now increasingly focused on energy transition areas. As I was thinking of this panel discussion, 2 questions came to my mind given your unique position. First, how do you see technologies around energy transition adapting and synchronizing with the traditional technologies which are already deployed? And second, do you think the technology innovation and evolution is happening fast enough?
First of all, Vikas, thank you for having me here, and congratulations to the organizers first. Amazing event, a lot of great interaction with the customers. It's a tremendous question. We are in a world where sustainability or energy transition is going at a very fast pace. The exciting time for this industry, just because the new technologies in the sustainability space are being developed at a breathtaking pace. Adoption is where we got to focus on. But I think the question that you asked is really tremendous, because how do you make it reliable and affordable within the existing refinery network or the petrochemical network that we have? I can give a couple examples, right? If you think about sustainable aviation fuel technology, you can actually do it in multiple routes. One of the routes that people have been focused on is with HEFA fuels. And the technology that we actually provide in this particular space is a traditional hydroprocessing unit. For example, Honeywell's technology that we provide is a technology called ecofining, which uses a traditional hydroprocessing unit, which refiners are very comfortable with. On the other side, flip side of it, my friend Clare Harris is actually sitting there, who we just licensed our methanol to jet technology to power to X. That's a technology which is new. Even though methanol to olefins is a technology that has been commercialized for a very long time, and many units that are operating in that particular space, but going all the way from methanol, or especially taking green methanol to all the way to jet, is something new. But the world needs multiple different technologies to be able to solve the energy transition problem. And the more closer we are to the traditional space, the more comfortable our investors are going to be. But I think that's the job of a technology company like us, to be able to get it as close as possible, so you can actually develop a technology which is, if I can say three words: sustainable, affordable, and reliable. I think that's what is required at this point.
And do you think it's happening fast enough?
The technology is developing at a very fast pace. The adoption is slow just because the technologies are so new, and the affordability is also is slightly on the higher end right now. So we got to get to solve those two problems for it to.
No, thanks, Rajesh, for your opening comments. Vikram, let me come to you. You've been long associated with the energy sector, first advising clients, and now in your current role, representing a leading developer who's deploying serious capital in solar, wind, storage, and other decarbonization areas. My specific question to you is, how is technology impacting cost and competitiveness in the renewable domains, especially solar, wind, and storage, which are literally a lot is being invested in India at this stage? And can we expect these trends to continue increasing competitiveness?
Thank you for that question. So I think technology is really at the heart of this transition, and from our vantage point as a developer, we track technologies very, very carefully. Let me take a few examples to sort of answer your question. Solar modules. I mean, at one level, these have been around for over 2 decades now, and one could argue that has the technology played out completely, and therefore are we at a plateau? The answer to that is possibly no. And even as we stand today, there are technologies in the pipeline which could increase the efficiency of solar panels from where they are today by even another 20, 25, 30%, right? Similarly, storage is another, we all realize that as grids become more and more dependent upon renewable energy, storage is going to become a very, very important component to stabilize grids and take away the disadvantage of intermittency, which renewables is usually accused of. Now, storage prices, largely driven by technology improvements in the last 24 months, have literally halved, which basically means that it's very competitive now to build in storage and still be providing a firm power at a reasonably competitive prices compared to a thermal or a gas-based power. We are also seeing technological breakthroughs enabling some of the new sectors. Green hydrogen is another one of them. I would say that while the world was adjusting to alkaline, we have all types of, obviously, the PEM and the SOE, and so I would say that technology is really at the heart of, is going to be at the heart of, and has been at the heart of driving green transition.
So we can expect tariffs to keep coming down with new technology.
There's no reason why they should not.
Sure.
There's no
Thanks.
reason why it should
Heartening.
not.
Claire, let me move on to you next. You've been working in the domain of clean and green molecules. Half an hour ago, I just learned that two of you have collaborated on a new technology. What are some of the technology innovation? And for the audience, Claire's worked in Shell for a long period of time, and now she's working on a startup or accelerator, as Power2X is called. Claire, what are some of the technology innovations around these domains which excite you most?
Yeah, I think for me, there are two zones where it's very exciting. Energy transition, you either need to rewire, so really change from a sort of a fossil-based economy to electrons, or you need to refill because you need to put drop-in fuels into infrastructure. And I think in both those spaces, the technology that's developing is really exciting. If you look, we just heard about solar. You're now getting to the point where the price parity is such that people choose solar because it's cheaper, not because it's about just decarbonization or because it's more reliable. So solar battery tie-up. Then if you look at drop-in fuels, I think this is where we're still a bit more at the cutting edge of innovation, because we're really seeing people developing, for example, jet fuel from electrons and biogenic CO2, hydrogen. And that I think is almost the next frontier of where we're going to see this acceleration. That's certainly where we're working. And then if you look at the interface between these two energy fronts of innovation and digital, and I think the last panel we were hearing how the digital interface is making both of these areas more efficient. I think those innovation fronts are really exciting. When you see those come together, which we're seeing here today, I think that's when you start to see really accelerated transition.
Robert, if I come to you, you've been investing in climate tech companies for a long time. I have a two-part question for you in the first round. From your vantage point, do you see sufficient technology innovations which can help in smoothing the energy transition? And where do you see these innovations coming from? Is it new companies, the traditional companies, academic research? What's the source of these innovations?
Yeah, thanks for having me here today. The answer to the first part of the question is definitely yes. We see, and for a long time, lots of innovation across all vectors of the energy transition, whether it's renewables, green molecules, even nuclear, both fission and fusion. If anything, in some parts we see too much innovation, but too fragmented, where you just struggle to find out what is the difference here. And you rather have people work more together to get on the cost down curve on any of the various paths, specifically in the fusion, of in the that's in the nuclear domain. So yes, and a lot of the technologies that we need for the energy transition today, we just need to scale up. So it's more a matter of reliable policies and having the people and capital to scale up, let's say for the coming decade. And then for full decarbonization, you need to still crack a few nuts, but you know, there's no reason we can't get there. To the second part of the question, where is it coming from? Well, a lot of it is funded from universities over a very long period that get out of the lab where we try to catch them early. Then it still takes another 10 years to really get from, you know, pilot to, you know, commercial scale. And, you know, ISL Ventures were one of the few investors that actually write checks from $100K to $100 million to help these investors or these entrepreneurs along the cycle. Here in India, you know, the universities are top notch, right? The various IITs, we watch them closely to find the next unicorn.
Coming back to you, Rajesh, I understand you see biggest technology innovation opportunities in the domains of hydrogen, carbon capture, and renewable fuels. As organizations, you've also been focused on these areas. Would love to hear your perspectives on what's happening in each of these domains, if you can throw some light on it.
So, if I start with renewable fuels, the amount of technologies that we have developed in this space or others developing in this space is tremendous. You have technologies where you want to make SAF or renewable diesel through heifer-based feedstock, but as we all know, that feedstock is not going to be available for a long time now. So there's only a limited amount of feedstock there. But if you think about that technology, heifer-based technology has been developed 20 years back, but the market has been adopting now because of the need that we see in the energy transition space right now. But we're at a point where we don't have much feedstock available. And then if you move on from the heifer-based feedstock, we go into the technologies that we just talked about. Like, you know, how do you convert the CO2 to all the way to SAF, sustainable aviation fuel? And technologies like methanol to jet, or even ethanol to jet. So alcohol to jet is something that we've been working on quite a few over the last many years. And we've been licensing those technologies for customers like Power2X and many other customers that we have developed in the last few years. So those are the key technologies that we see in the renewable space right now. But the biggest one, I would say, is on the renewable fuel side. The opportunity is how do you actually develop a technology that goes from biomass? Because the amount of biomass that is available in the market today, especially in countries like India, has been tremendous. So how do you actually monetize that, convert that biomass all the way to make renewable fuels is something that we are focusing on tremendously. So on that side. And then on the hydrogen piece, the technologies on hydrogen has actually been there for a long time. If you think about blue hydrogen, Blue hydrogen, all you're doing is carbon capture there.
Yeah.
Right? Carbon capture technologies, whether it's amine-based technologies or cryo-based technologies, those technologies has been there for a long time. But adapting those technologies for energy transition is what we are currently doing. And that's where that's one of the reasons why you see a faster adoption in carbon capture, because the technologies have been very mature and people have been using that in places where energy transition is needed right now. So in that particular space, we have a technology called advanced solvent carbon capture technology, where it uses an advanced solvent to be able to take CO2 out. And then cryo-based technology is something there for a long time. Coming to green hydrogen is something it's going at a much slower pace than anybody wants to at this point. And for many reasons, right? I think we are in that particular space. We've been a lot of technology development in electrolyzers and how do you actually make the electrolyzers much more efficient. So there's a lot of work going on in that space. And then I think we talked about the hydrogen carbon capture, right? And then energy storage. Energy storage, I think Vikram said it right. How can we make those energy storage much more efficient? Efficiency is the name of the game there. And using reliable lithium-based technology has been made tremendous amount of developments in the last 24 months. The prices have gone down maybe 50%. But I think there is more room to make it much more efficient. And efficiency is the name of the game in that space right now. So again, the opportunity, as I said, is huge. The technologies are developing fast. It's the adoption is something that we need to really think about. How do we make that technologies more affordable to adopt?
Great. And I'm sure your forecast on cheaper batteries is going to be music to Vikram's ears. Or maybe not. Maybe that pivots me to an interesting question, Vikram. In your role of leading Renew's foray in international markets, you've been investing in emerging green technologies, evaluating them, not only in India, but in global context also. Where do you see the most disruption likely to happen in the coming times from your vantage point as a developer? And would it be around renewable energy generation? Would it be around molecules or something else? And how do you see the pace of technology disruption in different parts of the world? Are we keeping pace in India with the same you see elsewhere?
So look, I think to me, technology disruption at scale is happening in areas where the economic case is already built, right? So to me, for example, from here on, if I was to look at all renewable technologies, storage stands out as possibly the one where we will see most disruption at scale. Doesn't mean that other areas will not go from 0 to 1, but storage is really in the 1 to 10 and 10 to potentially 100 moment, right? So I think storage is clearly one. There are many vectors to storage, right? There is a vector around short duration storage and long duration storage. There is a vector around, various versions of power to X, power to heat, and so on and so forth. So I think we are, at least personally, I feel storage is the one over the next 3 to 4 years, which is going to see a tremendous amount of innovation. Again, I think staying on the renewable side, we are also seeing innovation happen, as I was mentioning earlier, even on the solar side, right? The kind of, the solar, is really what's driving this whole transition. I mean, if you think about overall globally, right, the kind of capacity which is being put into solar is bypass, by far long distance away from any other, alternate technology, right? And even there, whether it is the shift from monoperc, then to TOPCon, then to HJT, then people are talking about perovskites, and then there is something beyond that as well, right? So I would say that there's a fair amount of focus and dollars which is going there to make that 20%, the next 20% efficiency happen. I would say that the area which requires which needs to go from 0 to 1, just in sense of this thing will be on the molecule side, right? I think on the molecule side, and Rajesh mentioned this, that look, green hydrogen is moving slowly, right? And what we have to always realize is capital will only flow in, not because something is a cool thing to do, but because it'll earn adequate risk-adjusted returns, right? And for that to play out on the molecule side, we need the costs to come down, right? We need the off-takers to be encouraged to come out and sign, not in a few hundred thousands, but in millions of tons. That's not going to happen unless the technology curve comes down. And that's where I would say, for example, electrolyzer efficiency, right? Today, if we are talking about 50 kilowatt hour per kg of hydrogen, can there be a breakthrough which can bring that down dramatically to half the cost of hydrogen. So I would say those are some of the, so that's part A of your question. Part B, I would say that I think some of these technologies will require global collaboration, right? I think different parts of the world will bring different strengths to the table. A lot of this is being developed in universities, as was being talked about earlier, but a lot of this would need to be tested and scaled in another part of the geography, right? So I would say global collaboration is required to fasten that decade curve that was being talked about, right? From taking it from a lab to a pilot scale to few plants to industry. I think that's a decade-long journey, and that can be shortened through some of these global collaborations.
Thanks. I really like how you said 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and your views on categorizing the technologies there. Good to see that batteries in that. I also agree that battery, there's a lot to be learned on the battery storage space right now. Clare, I'm just going to pivot to what Vikram just said and on hydrogen, and even Rajesh alluded to that, the green hydrogen slower. A few years ago, we saw significant interest in hydrogen projects, and those days everything was put a project somewhere else, put it on a ship in green ammonia and send it to Europe. Has the actual development kept pace with the announcements? And related question, how do you see ammonia versus methanol battle playing out? And Rajesh, to your point, what we were just discussing, what do you see winning amongst those?
Yeah, the million-dollar question. Well, so firstly, I think hydrogen, we all know there was a lot of hype when and if you think about the classic hype cycle, a huge number of announcements, a lot of excitement. And I think we now see a place where the most credible, most advantaged projects are winning. I think if you think about the different sectors, I think nobody really knew 100% whether electrification of transport or hydrogen was going to win. And I think we've started to see that in that world, electrons are winning. So then you move to hydrogen being very focused on the hard-to-abate sectors. And there you need to look at infrastructure and you need to look at the most advantaged environments. So I think what we then see is countries that have natural fundamentals, like India, being well positioned to actually really accelerate and take up a completely different space in the energy system. You're seeing a real evolution of countries that were massive fossil players now giving positions to effectively emerging players like India, which are just becoming energy champions because of the fundamentals of solar, wind, and the ability to bring hydrogen into the system. If you talk about then ammonia and methanol, I think they're actually really quite different molecules for different purposes. So obviously we all talk about maritime, and I think in maritime the jury's still out which molecule is going to win in maritime. In the long term, I think many people believe that ammonia will be successful. I think when you look at the very built-up shipping environments, and particularly in Europe, there has been some resistance to ammonia, more linked to permitting, societal expectations. Methanol, a tried and tested molecule, supply chains that have been around for decades. So a lot quicker adoption in terms of permitting and logistics. But then you look at other sectors, because clearly ammonia is targeting fertilizers and in some cases cracking into hydrogen, whereas methanol going into chemicals and actually really, I think, very exciting, going into aviation fuels. And aviation fuels is a place where we have very high conviction, with very strong mandates in Europe. And if you think about the mandate in 2030, Europe will need to blend 1.2% of fuel will need to be sustainable aviation fuel. So there's only a couple of places where you can get that. You can either get it through Fischer-Tropsch or you can get it from methanol to jet. And I think that's why we're so excited about that technology, because effectively that allows you to bring methanol from countries which are advantaged, like India, into the European market and turn it into jet fuel. And then that mandate increases very fast. So by 2035, that 1.2% goes to 6%. So I think in that world, you're going to start to see methanol playing a role in different industries. And so when you say which molecule is winning, I'm not sure it's a question of winning. I think, to be honest, I think all of these molecules are going to win against fossil.
Good.
And I think the question is speed, but I think if I look at what's happened on electrification, I think it's going to go faster than we think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Robert, let me come to you. Since you've invested across the entire energy transition landscape, including in mobility, would love to hear what are some of the most promising technology innovations which excite you and which are relevant for a country like India?
So, well, first, I guess, all of the above, because the energy transition goes over so many factors, to use the word again. But let me start with AI. Clearly, my steer to the team here has been to find, the Indian DeepSeek, and then specifically not, for LLMs, but to, build the AI agent that businesses can use to map their manufacturing or industrial base, to understand where the energy consumption, emissions are at, where the opportunities lie. And to give you an example, in our portfolio, we've run a technology that's a digital twin for large assets. One deployment on one asset, delivered incremental free cash flow of over $500 million. That's one technology tailored to one specific asset. So you can imagine for India, which has a tremendous industrial base, which will only increase as it's building out its infrastructure, that the opportunity that lies from these type of models, just in terms of efficiency, are immense. And then I think the two other buckets, one is clearly the electrification across the value chain, and I agree around batteries. That's, I think, truly the area for India to focus on, because you don't want to move from importing oil to importing batteries, right? And there's still plenty of time to develop, different batteries for different use cases. But everything around the grid stability, transmission, is a huge, I think, domain for innovation. And then last, around the molecules, right? So it's green molecules, but also carbon capture, carbon removal, of course, with the right policies to it, down to regenerative ag practices that also have a massive impact.
We have about 10, 11 minutes left, so I'm going to do one more round with shorter answers probably. Just keep it to about 2 minutes each. Let me start with you, Rajesh, again in the same order. How's a player like Honeywell, EOP, supporting the climate tech innovation space in India? Where do you see most potential in India? What's your focus in this market?
That's a tremendous question, because if you look at Indian market, the amount of biomass that is available, and I mentioned this earlier, the agricultural waste that is available in India, paddy and other things, there is a huge potential for us to go that route, because the biomass can take you to get to syngas, and then once you get to syngas, you can get to methanol. And I truly believe methanol is going to be a building block for the future, because you can go to multiple routes. You can take methanol and then make green olefins if you want, go all the way to make sustainable aviation fuel. To me, that's a place where I believe there is a tremendous amount of potential. The second one, I think Robert mentioned this a little bit about AI. I'll call it as digital services, because skilled workers, you're going to see a shortage in it. And especially when you think about biogas is another big wave in India right now. Compressed biogas is another big wave. If you think about this biogas and compressed biogas, you have smaller units, but thousands of those smaller units. How are you gonna support those many units with operators everywhere? So you need to start thinking about autonomy, autonomous operations, digital services. That's going to be a huge focus in India going forward, because not just in India, but in entire world, skill set of workers available in the next 10, 15 years there's going to be tremendous shortage there. Plus the number of units that we are talking about where new technologies, not much expertise in that space. How is AI or automation going to help you operate this unit is going to be a tremendous focus in the next decade.
Thanks, Rajesh. Actually, you talked biofuels. I'm going to flip it over to Clare next. Clare, you guys have been involved in biofuels. You heard about the potential it has in India. I'm sure in your going around the exhibition halls, you've seen there's a lot of focus on it, but the promise is also not fully come up to the speed. We have not delivered to that promise of biofuel in India till recently. What can the Indian ecosystem learn from Europe around development of biofuels? Is there something we could do differently?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably three things. Some things not to do and some things to do. So I'd say the things not to do are to change regulation all the time. And I think Europe is learning that that is not very helpful in driving accelerated innovation. So I think having a mandate, having regulation and sticking with it is very important, because then people can innovate around it. Get the right regulation, so don't stick with bad one. But once you have a regulation or a policy framework that works, then just not fiddling too much with it is useful. So I think designing the right policy framework is very important. Secondly, I think not just the actual core of biofuels, but actually looking at the adjacencies of, for example, biogenic CO2. So I think both the biofuel itself, but also CO2 and CO2 that comes from biogenic sources will actually be enormously important in energy transition. And I think that that's a zone where we're only at the beginning of innovation there. And that will become a really important strategic control point. And we see in Europe that the most advantaged projects and the most advantaged players are those that saw biogenic CO2 as a resource. So not just the biofuel, but the CO2 as well. And then I think the third thing is not underestimating the existing supply chains, the existing skills that come with moving molecules around. So looking at the skills that come with managing gas networks, with managing logistics, with managing roads, blending, all the things that actually are needed to run a successful biofuels ecosystem. I think investing in what might feel a bit boring, but the technology and the toolkit to do those kind of things, I think, is important. I think Europe's been quite successful there, and I think there are examples in India of successful innovation there that I think drawing those parallels will be very important to scale.
Thanks. And anything we could learn on the sourcing of the raw material? Is any good practices from Europe?
I'm not so sure about good practices, but I think things that are going to be very important is supply chain transparency, and about the responsibility of the supply chain is the traceability. So unlike electrons, where you can see where the electrons come from, and then there's the digital ecosystem, and if I think about what Renew are doing around the digital ecosystem around electrons, this incredible ability to understand what's going on enables you to then use those electrons all the way through supply chains to the end customer. I think with biofuels, and if you think about things like HEFA, which is using waste, used cooking oils, the need to understand what is behind that in terms of source, quality, but also things like human rights, child labor, responsible supply chains, I think we can't underestimate those things. So investing not only in the actual physical feedstock, but also investing in the traceability, the digital certification, making sure that investment goes at the same pace as the physical investments, I think will be important.
Robert, let me come to you. You've been supervising SV investments, the Shell Ventures investments and portfolio in India. How do you rate our climate tech innovation space in India, and as you compare it with the other parts of your portfolio, and where do you see action coming in India, and where would you want to invest more in India?
So we rate it quite high in terms of the pace of testing and iterating in specifically in the area where I got a lot of excitement from is the electrification of mobility. We have 4 investments from EV charging, static, to financing of fleets, alt mobility, where it's not only about hard tech, but also finding the right business model and manage the battery appropriately, to using it also now for intercity buses with our investment in FreshBus, down to large fleets for Rapido. So there we actually see investments doing all very well and the opportunity to make money. So clearly as an investor, that's where I get the energy from. Where we need to see, let's say, more is, I think, a lot of attention and capital goes into mobility, which leaves some of the other sectors behind on the green molecule bit. And there it's very much a cost down game, right? So how to reduce the cost for moving green electrons, but also carbon capture. So I think there's tremendous potential. The number of smart people in this country in a young age that want to tackle these problems, there's no comparable. So I think India is in an excellent place to lead in a number of these areas over the coming decade.
Thanks, Robert. My last question to Vikram, for a very quick answer. You're investing serious capital in an industry where innovation is happening very fast, 0 to 1 and 1 to 10, to borrow your words. Does it scare you sometime? You invested in something and tomorrow there is a new technology. And how do you factor in technology evolution in your investment decisions?
Well, yes. I mean, it's technology changes are happening at a much faster clip, and I think part of the risk in our industry, at least on the power side, is managed because you get a 25-year PPA, right? So you price a certain technology of today, but you are assured that you're not going to be priced out because you're sort of locked into a 25-year contract. But what we are seeing is in some of the new segments like molecules, the molecules part of the world is not used to 25-year fixed price contracts. So those are the slivers which make us even more nervous. That what if we invest today and you have a 5-year, 10-year offtake, but the life of the plant is 25 years. So what if the 11th year, when there is no PPA or HPA in this case, there is the technology which disrupts and can come down to 50%. So that's a serious consideration, and we have to figure out, together ways to circumvent some of those challenges.
Thanks. We are almost on the top of the hour. Thank you all for a fascinating discussion. My key takeaways: technology adoption closer to your core technologies, especially in the process areas, is easier. 0 to 1, 1 to 10 is something I will take away. And Clare, thank you for your views around biofuels, hydrogen, and others. And Robert, very excited to hear that you're bullish on tech in space in India. So thank you all. It was a wonderful hearing your views. Thank you.